Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Steve Traylor, Executive Director of NATOA. It's so great to see so many faces here to hear me talk this afternoon. I know that's why you're here. Actually, in a few minutes, we'll have Chairman Wheeler coming up here to address you all. But first off, I just want to make some housekeeping announcements. First off, we want to thank NCTA for sponsoring this morning's breakfast. And all the folks at Best & Krieger for sponsoring this afternoon's refreshment break. After the chairman's speech this afternoon, we're going to have the passport drawing. It's going to be held in this room. You must be present to win. We're going to have two winners. If you've completed your blue card with all the sponsor signatures on it, make sure that you hand it over to Jen or Tanya. And the prizes this year will be 2 free registrations to NATOA's 2015 annual conference, which will be held in San Diego. In a minute, I'm going to introduce a couple board members, and they're going to come up here and award our annual Community Broadband Awards. As most of you know, 2 of our previous winners have been the city of Wilson, North Carolina, and Chattanooga. And they were awarded these prizes to congratulate them for the work that they've done with their networks in their communities. Right now, they're also in the news because these 2 jurisdictions filed petitions with the FCC regarding state barriers to broadband deployment. As you all know, NATOA does not do things by itself. We work in great coalitions with a lot of organizations out there, including the U.S. Conference of Mayors, the National Association of Counties, the National League of Cities, and a lot of others. We work with certain specific coalitions that really focus on specific issues, such as the Shelby Coalition. They look really close at E-rate, and we really follow their lead on what they do, and we're a member of the Shelby Coalition. Earlier this year, NATOA joined another coalition called CLIC. It's the Coalition for Local Internet Choice. They are going to be our face partner on dealing with these petitions that were filed with the FCC concerning Wilson and Chattanooga. And their president is Joanne Hovis, and who's our immediate past president. And Jim Baller is also on their board, and everybody knows Jim Baller. So if you have interest in what CLIC is doing and what they're going to be doing as far as these petitions are concerned, make sure you reach out to them. They are one of our sponsors here, so it's really nice to see Joanne and Jim really stepping up to the plate and taking the lead on this. We try to get involved in a lot of issues, but we really appreciate our coalition partners that can really focus their time and energy. And so again, thank you, Joanne. And right now, I'm going to go ahead and introduce 2 of our board members. They're going to come up here and award this year's Community Broadband winners, Lori Sherwood and Brian Roberts.
Thank you, Steve. In recognition of the broadening role of government and technology, NATOA proudly honors outstanding individuals and projects that seek to improve government and public options in broadband technology. Our Community Broadband Awards program was initiated to recognize and highlight some of the many extraordinary efforts going on at the local level to bring the benefits of technology to American communities. Throughout the United States, numerous exceptional leaders in government, business, organizations, and the community are serving as champions of local interests and needs in broadband technology. NATOA today proudly recognizes these efforts and achievements with the following recipients. Our first award is a local award from Minnesota and goes to our 2 outstanding community broadband heroes of the year, Minnesota Senator Matt Schmidt and Minnesota Representative Eric Simonson, for courageously authoring and championing the border-to-border broadband fund bill that passed in the Minnesota legislature, securing $20 million in funding that helps remove barriers to opportunities for much-needed broadband development. Please welcome Senator Matt Schmidt and Representative Eric Simonson.
And the Grammy goes to? I'll tell you what, we don't have a whole lot of time. I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us here in Minnesota. I've been so interested in this debate for the last decade, going from city to city around the country. It's great to see folks come to Minnesota to talk about the importance of broadband development. So thank you for taking the time. Of course, we rolled out the nice weather for you, too. It was 80 degrees just a couple days ago, let me tell you. In any event, Eric, please come up here. We didn't prepare to have a tag team or anything like that, but really this last year has been so special in terms of the broadband discussion in Minnesota. And it was about a year ago that we set out on a border-to-border broadband listening tour, essentially. And I'm Matt Schmidt. I'm from Red Wing, if you know Red Wing Shoes, Red Wing Pottery. That's my hometown. And we wanted to get outside of Red Wing and talk with folks around the state about the importance of broadband in their lives and their community's competitiveness. And we heard loud and clear 3 important things. 1, that broadband is vital to 21st century competitiveness. And 2, the state has to do something, but it has to realize that the challenge is not the same in all parts of the state. We have different geographies, we have different markets. We've got to have a facilitative role for the state, not a one-size-fits-all approach. And the third thing is we've got to quit talking and we have to act. People who know this issue know it well, and we've been talking far too long. So in the 2014 legislative session here, I was so thrilled to be able to work with Representative Simonson and introduce our border-to-border broadband competitive grant program. We asked for $100 million to spur on private and local investment in extending networks to hard-to-reach areas in Minnesota, those areas that fall short of our state speed goals that are in statute. And we won't talk about whether or not those speed goals are up to par, but the fact that we're not meeting those state speed goals in all corners of the state, we've got to meet those before we do anything. And we were able to get a down payment on that effort, $20 million to spur on investment. And we're so hopeful that the application process that's opened right now is going to result in great community dialogues, good applications, and a number of applications and of broadband requests for next legislature to consider how to improve this competitive grant program going forward. The Governor's Task Force on Broadband recently agreed unanimously to suggest that we ask for $200 million in the next legislative session. You don't always get what you ask for, but darn it, that's the right magnitude that we've got to be talking about here in Minnesota. So I know you didn't come to hear me talk, and I don't have any jokes, so I'm going to quit yapping away here. But I just want to say before I pass the mic over to Representative Simonson that it was truly a team effort at the legislature this year, and the House really did carry the water on this issue, from the Speaker all the way down. Every member of the legislature, every committee, on the House side in particular, dealt with this issue, and we're here today because of their tremendous leadership. So thank you, and thank you, Representative Simonson.
Thank you, Senator Schmidt, and thank all of you for coming. And I really do appreciate the opportunity to come here and just say a few words and receive this this wonderful recognition. I do appreciate that. I got an email in the last couple of days that said you're going to get this award and it's going to be at this time at this place, and you only have 1 minute to speak. But there's way too many people in this room that can only limit me to 1 minute. But really, what I want to say very clearly and send this message back with all of you is that who we really should be awarding this to is to the people of Minnesota. Because they have taken a step, and we have seen Minnesota come around a corner, where Minnesota recognizes that provision of broadband is not just a luxury anymore, it's a necessity. And it is a part of our critical infrastructure, no different than electricity was, or sewer lines were, or water lines were, however many decades ago. And I think that Minnesota, as we've had, and this has really been prompted by Senator Schmidt and his work across the state, but we're seeing that Minnesota is having these discussions in their communities, and they're saying, hey, we need to look to the future of our state. We need to be concerned about our economic development. We need to be concerned about what Minnesota looks like 10, 20, 50, 100 years from now. And the best tool that we can put in place is to have an effective broadband system that deploys enough bandwidth and is fast enough for our businesses to compete in today's market. So I'm very proud of Minnesotans. I'm very proud of the state legislature. We took a big step here in 2014 with the $20 million, but we've got a long ways to go, and we know that. But we want to partner with other states, and we want really, everybody to get on board and say, you know what, this is part of critical infrastructure. It's necessary for Minnesota. It's necessary for our country to survive in today's market. So I just want to say thank you for the opportunity. Glad to be here, and hope you have a great conference. Thanks.
Next, we'd like to recognize our Community Broadband Organization of the Year. And that award goes to Older Adults Technology Services, or OATS, from New York, for pioneering, developing, and sustaining extraordinarily successful broadband adoption programs that have changed lives by bringing the benefits of digital technology and broadband to over 15,000 older adults who have not before found the technology accessible. Accepting the award for OATS is the Executive Director, Tom Camber. Tom?
Thank you, Brian. It's so exciting to be here at the NATOA conference and learn how many different programs are going on around the country. When we started out at OATS 10 years ago, we were just a small one-site organization that was working with a housing group in Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn. And we had 12 senior citizens sitting around a table trying to figure out how to get on the computer and use a mouse. And to come to a conference like this and learn all the things that are going on in North Carolina and in Sandy and in Austin, Texas, and talk to people who are really visionaries and are doing so much with these programs is so inspirational for somebody that comes out of a community background like that. So I really want to thank NATOA for the award and for giving us the opportunity to connect to organizations across the country doing this sort of work. When we first started out, a lot of people said senior citizens either don't want to learn technology or they just can't. It's how are you going to teach an 80-year-old person to use a mouse who never played a video game? And it turned out that, in fact, people would come to classes and they would do 20 sessions just to learn how to use email and keep coming back week after week. One gentleman took our course and he felt like he didn't quite get it, so he went back and took the whole course over again. So it took him 6 months, but he got on email and he got internet. And now we've been very fortunate to be supported by a BTOP grant from the federal government in collaboration with the City of New York. We were able to launch the Senior Planet Exploration Center in New York City, seniorplanet.org, for those of you out there tapping on your phones. And it's the country's first technology-themed community center focused on the needs of senior citizens in America. We had 10,000 visitors our first year, and we've come a long way because from those first days where people were asking what the mouse was and how it differed from a mouse that had fur. A couple of months ago, I was at the center, and a woman was doing a micro-entrepreneurship program with Etsy. She's an 85-year-old cancer survivor. She lives in Harlem, and she asked me if I could help her edit the JavaScript on her Etsy page. And I said, okay, we've now surpassed my level of expertise. So anyways, we're just very grateful to be able to be here. And honestly, I think at this stage, we're now throwing it out to the country and saying, what can we do for another 20 million seniors that are still not online? And I know that's a collaborative effort, so I'm really looking forward to working with the rest of you at NATOA. I want to just thank briefly our government supporters, our corporate supporters, many of whom are here that work in the telecommunications industry and foundations, and also the staff at OATS who have really been the bedrock of our success. So thanks to everybody.
Our next award is the Community Broadband Fiber Network of the Year. The Hartford Metro Area Network, otherwise known as HMAN, is in Hartford County, Maryland, for building, developing, and constructing a network in Maryland that will reach over 150 community anchor institutions and provide over 160 miles of high availability, high bandwidth connectivity that will secure the county's economic future. Accepting the award today, we're pleased to have Hartford County Executive David Craig and Ted Pibble, Director for Hartford County Government.
Good afternoon. It's been a very deep honor to have been here for Hartford County in this really beautiful area. My wife Melinda is here, and she knows that I'm not a technical person because our 4-year-old grandson Joey can take a better picture than I could take a picture. But it was important when I became the county executive, after having been a senator and delegate, to understand about the infrastructure we needed in the county. And so the really best thing that I think I did on this was I appointed and had this man leave his business, Ted Pibble, and come and become the director of our department and persuade everyone that we needed to do this so we could provide good public service to our children for education, to our firefighters and our police officers for connections and security, and also to expand our economic base. So it's very much a pleasure. And Ted, if you'd like to say a word? No? That's what he usually does. But he did a great job on this, and this is the invisible infrastructure. Everybody understands roads, you know, the electricity, all those things, but not all of them really understand this invisible infrastructure. So I really am thankful for this group for doing this for Harper County. Thank you.
So next, we'd like to recognize the Community Broadband Project of the Year. It's the Oconee Focus for transforming rural Appalachian Oconee County into a broadband oasis by creating a 245-mile fiber network, providing reliable, high-capacity, redundant connections both into and out of the county. Through a collaboration of community leaders, including county government, local businesses, the Red Cross, and the Eastern Band of the Cherokee Indians. Accepting the award for Oconee Focus is Mike Powell. Mike?
I'd like to personally, and on behalf of Oconee County, thank the NATOA. Our projects have had many challenges, but we've survived and we're viable. And I think that's due to, the BTOP, due to good help, good sources for consultants, and we're making a difference on education and making a difference in our community. Thank you very much.
Next, we'd like to recognize a couple of awardees who couldn't make it this year. One is for the Community Broadband Wireless Network of the Year, is the City of Wilmington and New Hanover County, North Carolina, for developing the first TV white space network that now delivers wireless connectivity to dispersed remote locations. And the other is Martin County, Florida, and this is for Community Broadband Project of the Year, along with Oconee. For creating a fiber network which supports the data, voice, and video needs of the county, including local governments and business. So, finally, please welcome NATOA President Tony Perez. He has a few words for us now. Tony?
Good afternoon. How's everyone doing? This is a wonderful honor for me to introduce Chairman Wheeler. Before I do, I want to make a few brief remarks that I think that all of us here understand that America has an existing broadband deficit. When you look at some of the international rankings, whether it's OECD or Akamai or other rankings, we're anywhere between 30th and 8th, something like that, the last time I checked. And certainly that's not good enough for a country that invented the internet and whose companies like Microsoft, Amazon, to name the Seattle folks, Google, Netflix, and others are really transforming our society and our economy. So I think there's a lot to be done so that we can once again reclaim our rightful place at the center of global broadband leadership. And it's going to take contributions from both the public sector, the local communities, and the private sector as well. Nobody can do this by themselves. Local governments in particular have been very active in this area for many years. About 20 years ago, cities like Seattle began building out their own fiber networks to connect our libraries, schools, other public institutions. Some of us have built our own fiber-to-the-home networks, such as we've heard Chattanooga, of course, Wilson, but other really diverse communities like Sandy, Oregon, Chelan County, Washington. Some of us has partnered with private industry, like Google. Over 1,100 cities applied for the Google RFP, and I think a very forceful articulation of the thirst for more robust broadband connectivity in our communities. Others continue to look at the public assets that they have that may be leveraged by the private sector to build broadband networks, and even reviewing the policies, processes, permitting processes, and other activities to see if there are ways to facilitate more private incentive, to create more incentives for private investment. So we're involved, and we're doing our part, and I know there are many issues before the FCC and the Commissioner, such as some mega merger activity that we're all aware about, but spectrum allocation, network neutrality, IP transition. But before I introduce the chairman, I wanted to commend him for his strong leadership in recognizing the essential role of local communities in expanding next-generation broadband options, and for his outspoken defense of their rights to choose for themselves the technology solutions most appropriate for their communities. Thank you. And now for my formal introduction, because you're probably tired of hearing me talking. That's not why you're here. Tom Wheeler is the 31st chairman of the Federal Communications Commission. On November 4th, became the commissioner on November 4, 2013. Chairman Wheeler was appointed by President Barack Obama and unanimously confirmed by the United States Senate. For over 3 decades, Chairman Wheeler has been involved with new telecommunications networks and services, experiencing the revolution in telecommunications as a policy expert, an advocate, and a businessman. As an entrepreneur, he started or helped start multiple companies offering innovative cable, wireless, and video communication services. He is the only person to be selected to both the Cable Television Hall of Fame, the Wireless Hall of Fame, a fact President Obama joked made him the Bo Jackson of telecom. Prior to joining the FCC, Chairman Wheeler was managing director at Core Capital Partners, a venture capital firm investing in early-stage internet protocol-based companies. He served as president and CEO of Shiloh Group, a strategy development and private investment company specializing in telecommunication services, and co-founded SmartBrief, the internet's largest electronic information service for vertical markets. From 1976 to 1984, Chairman Wheeler was associated with the National Cable Television Association, where he was president and CEO from 1979 to 1984. Following that, Chairman Wheeler was CEO of several high-tech companies, including the first company to offer high-speed delivery of data to home computers and the first digital video satellite service. From 1992 to 2004, Chairman Wheeler served as president and CEO of CTIA. So, enough of my introduction. Please join me in a warm NATOA welcome to Chairman Tom Wheeler.
Thank you, Tony, and thank all of you for that incredibly warm welcome. And also, congratulations to the award winners and to Senator and Representative Senator Schmidt and Representative Simonson. It's leadership like that that we've got to figure out how to export to the other 49 states. Thank you. It's great to be here at NATOA in Minnesota. perhaps that's why, as I look out over this group, all the women are strong, the men are good looking, and the policy proposals are above average. But I'd like to actually choose as the intellectual foundation for our discussion today the words of Minnesota's favorite son from Hibbing, Bob Dylan, and his wise observation that you'd better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, because the times they are a-changin'. That's the challenge that we all face. You know, Steve and I were talking earlier about the importance of working together, about us in government working together, about the importance of working together with industry and other players. That's our challenge. The times are changing, and how are we going to meet that challenge? There's no doubt that high-speed broadband, both wired and wireless, is changing the economic underpinnings of our country and the lifestyles of our people. Those who embrace that broadband-driven change will define the future. Those that don't, well, they'll sink like a stone. NTOA and the FCC are swimming to a common goal of making sure that communities across America, whether large or small, have access to robust broadband networks that deliver the benefits of broadband connectivity to everyone. But you may have noticed that not everyone is swimming alongside us. There are those who seek to block the competitive forces that can produce faster, cheaper, better broadband. There are those who make it difficult to build out the infrastructure necessary for the broadband future. And there are those with which both you and we have to contend, who would use changes in technology as an excuse to sidestep the responsibilities that network operators have always had to those who use their networks. Today, I'd like to visit about our responsibility to overcome this resistance and ensure that our nation has the networks necessary for the jobs, the economic growth, and the quality of life that will determine our nation's place in the 21st century. Yeah, that's a pretty dramatic statement. And yes, it's that important. Our nation's place in the 21st century. And yes, I know that it's a lot easier to say than to do. You and your positions in your communities, and my colleagues and I in our positions at the FCC, have responsibilities, not just to the consumers and networks of today, but also to the consumers and networks of tomorrow. But here's the reality that's confronting us. We need faster networks in more places. I agree totally with Tony's observation about the broadband deficit, and I get frustrated, as I know Tony said he did, and I'm sure the rest of you do, seeing the charts where the U.S. ranks in comparison to broadband speeds of other nations. Table stakes for the 21st century is 25 megabits a second, and winning the game means that consumers need to be able to get at least 100 megabits and more. The best way to get there is competition. Unfortunately, today, there's an inverse relationship between competition and throughput. 3/4 of American homes have no competitive choice for 25 megabits. And that includes almost 20% who have no choice at all. Another challenge we face is how wireless is increasingly critical as a broadband pathway. The 21st century is going to be defined by the networks that marry the ever-increasing computing power of Moore's Law with the invisible delivery of wireless spectrum. Our generation has been self-congratulatory about connecting people. 7 billion connections in a world, a planet populated by 7 billion people. But you and I must plan on what happens next. Steve and I were talking earlier. The forecasts are that by 2020, and that's only 6 years away, by 2020, there will be 50 billion connected devices as Moore's Law drives down the size and cost of remote computing power, and it's all connected invisibly by wireless. And into that kind of environment, openness is key. If networks are going to deliver on their possibilities, they have to be open. Blocking, discriminating, or degrading service for economic gain is contrary to the promise of broadband networks. Yet today we have no protections to assure that kind of openness on the internet. We must have rules that will establish that an open internet is a sine qua non of broadband. Now, a minute ago, I spoke about the responsibilities of networks. For the better part of a century, there's been a set of principles that has defined the relationship between those who build and operate networks and those who use them. I call this the network compact. And our goal as regulators and policymakers is to assure that these principles continue to define that relationship in the future. These principles include access, both to networks and on networks. Interconnection. By definition, a network is a series of connections. In the broadband world, the internet isn't a thing, it's a connection of networks. Third, consumer protection. You know, technology has been pushing the laws of physics, but nobody has changed the laws of human nature or economics in which people would want to take advantage of their situation, and somebody needs to protect them, protect the public. Fourth, public safety. We'll talk more about this in a minute, but it has to be, it must be, the underlying deliverable of all networks. And finally, the fifth item in the network compact, national security. In a world in which networks are now attack vectors, we have to make sure that those networks are secure and safe. There are those who would argue that the move from analog networks to IP, Internet Protocol networks, changes these principles. They are wrong. The form these principles or these responsibilities may take may change in an IP world. but the principles do not. And they should never go away. As we transition to an all-IP world, the challenge confronting those of us in this room is how do we preserve these values that we have come to expect from our networks, while at the same time seizing the opportunity that the new networks promise. So let's address those issues head on, and let's start with competition. Competition works, and how we behave determines whether there will be competition. The existence of 4 national wireless carriers, for instance, is an important priority, and we work to protect that priority. Similarly, there cannot be effective competition in wireless without new spectrum and without assuring that the most advantageous low-band spectrum is available to all competitors. We're doing both of those as well. The advantages of competition are so obvious and ingrained in the American psyche that many communities have stepped up to facilitate that level of competition where the private sector will not. And we saw ample examples of that and the benefits of that in the awards today. Communities are listening to the needs of their citizens and enterprises, engaging community stakeholders, and focusing on delivering competitive broadband services to respond to those needs. As you know, and as Tony has mentioned, Wilson, North Carolina, and Chattanooga, Tennessee, have petitioned the FCC to preempt the laws enacted by their state legislatures that prohibit them from expanding their community-owned broadband networks. There are currently laws in 19 states that impose restrictions of one kind or another on such local community decision-making. The absolute opposite of what the senator and the representative have done here in Minnesota. We will make our decision on those petitions on the record and on the merits. And I'm afraid that's all I can say about this today. However, I do encourage you to consider how local choice and competition can increase broadband opportunities for your citizens. I love the story of Lafayette, Louisiana, where the local incumbent fought the city's fiber network tooth and nail, bringing multiple court challenges and triggering a local referendum on the project. Thankfully, none of the challenges to prevent deployment, none of it prevented that deployment. 62% of the voters approved the network in a referendum, and the Louisiana Supreme Court unanimously sided with the city. But it cost them 3 years. But when the network was finally built, the community experienced the benefits of competition. No surprise, the local cable operator decided it was time to upgrade his network. We believe in competition. Competition works. Everybody ought to have the opportunity to provide for competition. Because local choice and competition are about as American as you can get. So these principles that we've talked about can play an important and essential role in assuring America's future. And here's where you and other local officials become critically important. If the infrastructure necessary to build out both wired and wireless broadband networks doesn't receive the prioritization that it warrants as a major national initiative, a major national imperative, then all the efforts to achieve faster, cheaper, and better broadband service that will enhance our nation's competitiveness, create quality jobs for our fellow citizens, and introduce services that will redefine both our commerce and our culture will be for naught. I know that it's often a zoning matter in which many of you are as much an observer as we are. In those instances where some of you play a role, however, I encourage you to be proactive. And in those instances where it's others who have the authority, I urge you to stand up for your telecommunications responsibilities to the United States of America. I understand very well, very real and strong, not in my backyard sentiments. Everyone wants cell phone service, but nobody wants cell phone antennas in their neighborhood. Everybody wants access to state-of-the-art transmission service, but no one wants the neighborhood streets ripped up. It reminds me of another non-Dylan folk song that everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. But what we're talking about is a national priority. It's about the maintenance of our economic leadership. It's about America continuing to be the home of innovation. We must find ways to enable the extension and the expansion of broadband. Local officials with permitting authority have a special obligation to both their communities and to their nation and a larger society. It is simply impossible to have the connectivity our nation requires without the necessary infrastructure. And while there is an understandable desire to engage in cognitive dissonance of wanting connectivity but not its consequences, as policymakers, we must resist within reason such myopia. In that regard, we must build on and expand the creative thinking that has been the hallmark of the good work that you have done to facilitate advanced broadband builds around the country. It's great that NATOA has developed best practices on tower siting and is updating those practices. As I understand it, there's also a guide that you've done on rights of way, but it's 12 years old. Things have changed a bit in a dozen years. I encourage you to update your rights of way guide. You have the ability to develop national best practices that embrace strategies that have been shown to work in today's technological and economic environments. Strategies that embrace new technology and new ideas to facilitate the timely deployment of wired and wireless broadband. You know, reference was made, it was made earlier, Tony made it, about Google and Google's application that got 1,100 cities around the country. They developed a city checklist to aid them in determining where they should invest in gigabit fiber. And the checklist contains a list of simple issues, things such as timely and accurate information about the access to poles and conduits. These low-cost steps are relevant to all broadband providers, not just Google. And we must bring those insights to all localities. At the FCC, we will use our authority to attack the broadband deployment challenge. We will work with you on those guidelines that you're working on, Steve, so that national best practices are included in what we call our Agenda for Broadband Competition, the ABCs of consumer choice in the 21st century. We will also move on our own authority. Last Friday, I proposed to my colleagues a new set of federal policies on the siting of wireless facilities. The proposal will take concrete steps to immediately and substantially ease the burdens associated with deploying wireless equipment, particularly the co-locations and deployments of small cells that can be installed unobtrusively on utility poles, buildings, and other existing structures. At the same time, my proposal preserves the frontline authority of local and tribal governments to determine which structures are appropriate for wireless deployments, as well as the authority to enforce building codes, electric codes, laws related to health and safety, and to require companies to use camouflage or concealment designs. The Commission will vote on this at our next open meeting on October 17th. There's another component of our broadband responsibilities, and that's video programming. Many of you got into this business through video programming, as did I. We've been hearing a lot lately that access to video is necessary for broadband deployment because consumers increasingly watch video online, and that translates into more demand for video quality broadband. So if we can make it easier for video choices to come to communities, we should be able to incent more broadband to come to communities. Broadband becomes more economically viable, we are told, when it's bundled with video services. In a perverse way, then, how localities handle video competition can determine whether they will have broadband competition. I want to close by emphasizing one other place that we must work together, and that's public safety. Robust, accessible 911 service is essential to our shared mission of public safety. The transition to all IP communications raises serious new challenges for 911. You know, we're used to thinking about 911 outages as a result of acts of nature, you know, a hurricane, a tornado, or flooding. But there's a new threat. The emerging next generation 911 system is more complex than legacy 911 systems and relies more extensively on infrastructure resources and the relationships that are multi-state or national even in scope. It is supported by a large number of service providers, including new entrants that are offering new niche functionalities. Innovation is good. We want to promote innovation, and we want NG911 to support new forms of emergency communications. But the creation of new complex systems for which no one is responsible, and where the system as a whole lacks reliability and resiliency, is not acceptable. This threat is real and is growing. In April, as Tony knows from firsthand experience, citizens in 7 states lost access to 911 for 6 hours. 6 hours. There was a story that I was told of a woman who was home alone with her young child and heard an intruder in her house and called 911 40 times unsuccessfully because the network was down. More than 5,600 911 calls did not get through because of a software glitch in an outsourced database. In August, there was a 911 outage in one of the nationwide wireless networks. And there was an outage in Vermont that knocked out 911 service statewide for nearly an hour. The fact that these outages occurred and the common issues that they raise are evidence of the challenge we face and suggest that we are at risk of experiencing far worse failures if we don't take action now. We recognize that states and local governments also have long-standing and significant responsibilities for 911 service within their jurisdictions. We believe the best approach is a partnership between the FCC and state and local authorities to ensure that there are no gaps in the reliability of the entire NG 911 system. The FCC staff has worked closely with state and local officials to investigate the outages that I've talked to you about and others. And at our open meeting next month, October 17th, I'm sorry, it's later this month now, isn't it? At our open meeting in 17 days, we will be presenting the findings of this investigation as well as recommendations for concrete steps to promote end-to-end reliability and accountability of the 911 system. The critical point is this: neither we at the federal level nor you at the state and local level have the ability to ensure end-to-end 911 reliability on our own. We must work together. And we must work together not just on 911, but on all the topics that we discussed today. This is what Steve and I were talking about before we came up here. When competitive broadband options don't exist, let's work together to create an environment that encourages investment that switches on America's competitive genius. When there's no broadband availability at all, let's work together to get the infrastructure deployed by any and all entities who are willing to step up to meet the challenge. When providers begin to retire legacy networks for newer technologies, let's work together to make sure that the expectations of consumers and businesses continue to be met, especially for the provision of public safety services like 911. For the times, they are a-changin'. Let's work together to embrace the new opportunities and to build on the opportunity that high-speed broadband creates for our country. Thank you very much.
So was that cool or what? Again, as we've mentioned earlier this week, this is the first time that we have ever had a sitting FCC chairman come to our conference and address our members. And also, it's nice to note that a lot of the issues the chairman brought up today are issues that we've been working on, and we know all about the wireless facilities order that we've been working on. We've been working on the community broadband and state preemption issues. So it's nice to know that we're on the forefront of those issues, especially on public safety and the great work that our Public Safety Committee does, chaired by Barry Frazier. Who, by the way, is the only non-board member who chairs a standing committee at NATOA. So Barry goes out of his way to make sure that we're totally informed about public safety communications and what FirstNet is doing. So Barry, again, great work for us. So before we go, we are going to have the drawing, and I've got them here. And again, the two winners will be given free registration to the 2015 annual conference in San Diego, and maybe we'll have a chairman there too, so we'll see. But I'm going to have Jody pick out the first one for me. And suspense builds. Before I mention who the first winner is, the tour buses tomorrow leave at 8 a.m. They might have been listed in 9 in the program or on the tickets, but please be on the buses at 8 a.m. tomorrow, which is way too early for me. So, are there any stores open at the mall at that time? What are you guys going to do there?
They're going to Bloomington first, the city hall first.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. Yay, a name I can pronounce. Our first winner is Bob Pierce from the city of Golden. Yeah.
Yes, Bloomington City Hall is open at 8 a.m.
Wow.
Right? Okay.
Well, this is a little harder one, but I think I can get it. Will Soderberg from the city of Des Plaines. Will Soderberg. Yay, there he is. Okay, excellent. So gentlemen, we'll make sure that staff out front have these and that you will be entitled to free registration next year. I think that's the end of our presentation for lunch now. So thank you all for coming. I think there's sessions, and I think, Jody, do we have the bus exhibit now? Yeah. Yeah, make sure you go across the street and see the Monster Truck Rally. So enjoy yourselves, folks.